Thank you everyone for coming. It's a big honor for me to be here. Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, it's such a great honor to be here. I went to Hunter. I was in the last class that graduated from the old building. My class, we closed that old building down. So like all this is kind of new to me. So I'm just like getting used to like the space and like just hearing about like the culture here. But yeah, so like I'm just like really happy to be here. A lot of the professors are still kind of here, like Paul Ramirez and Boschkov, Nari Ward, like all these great people are still here. Carlos, like all these really great people. So so basically I'll just start talking about my process, and I make work about my autobiographical kind of my whole life basically. My life experience is my work. When I was at Hunter, I started exploring that for the first time, and I'll just talk about this piece here. So I started exploring my work at Hunter, like kind of like everything that I'm doing now, kind of just like was like the foundation of it was like right here. And this is a performance where I crossed. I made a headdress, and I went to the U.S.-Mexico border. And this is, what year was this? Like 2011, this happened. And I went to the US-Mexico border, and the idea was to actually create a headdress that had a shiny reflector. And I was going to, as opposed to being camouflaged, I wanted to grab attention from the Border Patrol. And this was actually the second time, and this was going to be the second time that I was going to cross the border. And this time I'm a US citizen now, and I had a passport in my pocket. And I got on Marfa Radio, and I talked about my project. And I just had an interview on Marfa Radio, and they, little did I know that Border Patrol was listening. So this, I think it's like 8-hour drive turned into almost like a 20-hour drive from Marfa, Texas to the border, because the Border Patrol kept stopping me and harassing me and trying to intimidate me from like pulling off the performance. I was with my friend, she's African American. She was with me, and they at some point they were threatening to deport her. This is so absurd, like the power trip that they have at the border. So we just kind of, it was really difficult and very challenging. At some point we were like, okay, maybe I should pull back. And I was like, no, let me just keep going. So once I got to the opening, because there was like a small little group show at some like little like barn that was happening, and I was going to perform as part of it. When I got there was like 6 Border Patrol officers, and like there was like 2-3 cars, and there was even a helicopter flying around, just really trying to everything to intimidate me from crossing the border. And this is before like the whole Trump thing and the political climate of now. I can't imagine doing something like this now. It was very intimidating, and I had cameras rolling. I was like, whatever happens, like I'm like literally trying to cross the river, which the Rio Grande is the border in this part of Texas and Mexico. And the idea was to cross the river and to place a candle on the other side of the river for all the people that have passed away in this journey, right? And to actually do this light ritual with the sun setting when it was hitting the headdress, and I was going to reflect light into the water. So that was like the whole performance that I was doing. And Border Patrol did not want me to do it. So I was like, okay, just keep shooting cameras. If they arrest me or they try to deport me, like that's part of it. I'm a US citizen. I don't understand why this isn't even an issue. So when we got to the border, here we are. I'm about to perform, put the headdress on. And right before I put the headdress on, I put it on, and I was like, the Border Patrol's not doing anything. So immediately, I caught in the corner of my eye that they started talking to this couple that was there, and it was like a rich Texas guy with a giant Texas hat, and his wife had all this jewelry on, like this kind of like more like Native American jewelry. So I was like, that's interesting. And apparently they were like rich landowners from the area, and the minute that they found out they were there to support the arts, I literally saw the helicopter go away, and the Border Patrol cars just disappeared, and I was able to go and proceed and do my performance. And this is kind of like one of those pieces that really impacted my entire practice, because I realized like the power of art and everything that I was doing. I was like, oh wow, like it really kind of shifted my view as an artist. And I was doing that while I was at Hunter. And then this one, sorry. sorry, 1 second. How do you pause? Okay, sorry. So I'm going to talk about this other piece that I did. And this was a couple years ago in Austin, Texas. And this was in the GOP headquarters parking garage. It was part of a performance festival, and I was supposed to do something indoors, but again, I think where I'm performing is really important. Where the work is being shown is also important. So I decided I didn't want to perform indoors, and I asked to see if we can get permission so I can perform in the GOP headquarters. This is right when Trump took over, and there were people protesting outside because this is where all the immigration laws get passed. So somehow we got permission to perform, for me to perform this gigantic thing in front of the the political building. And in this performance, I brought a whole everyone in the performance, other than the motorcycles, were part of they're all immigrants, right? So I have the quinceañeras, I have Tibetan throat singers. I have these Polish people, these Polish immigrants that had disabilities. They're deaf and mute, so they're doing the sign language. So I created this whole team of immigrants that were being affected by all the laws that were changing rapidly. And also the motorcycle gang is an all-feminist motorcycle gang from San Antonio, Texas. Oops, a little low.
Always participatory performance. So if you're frustrated with our political climate, I want to hear some yelling. Okay, so when I look at my hand like this, that's a key.
So the idea was to decolonize this space by using sound. I usually tend to tell people that my work is 49% like visuals and 51% sound. And it's something that came about from talking to a video game designer. Basically, I had a conversation with a video game designer years back, and he mentioned that when they're making video games, it's like 51% of it is like the sound. And that kind of blew me away. I was like, wow. And then I really started, I was like, you know what, I think I want my work to be that way too. So I started really exploring sound. And for this performance, basically I used the roaring of the motorcycles as like a healing device, right? Because I do a lot of sound therapy, but I use traditional gongs and other types of instruments. But in this case, because of the political climate is so intense right now, and this political building's right in front, I wanted to use the motorcycles and the steel and concrete structure, which is the parking garage, to amplify the sound even more. And I wanted it to be heard. I wanted to disturb the political, whatever's happening politically in that space. And basically, since we're over 70% water, what happens is the vibration of the Harley-Davidsons or the gongs or whatever instruments that I'm using kind of shakes all the water and the toxins in your body, releases all the anxiety, right? I mean, in some cases, if you do it enough, it's like meditation, basically. It kind of like really levels you. It's a way of leveling things. In some cases, it has been shown that it can even cure some illnesses, different types of, not the motorcycles, but the gongs and other healing instruments. And that was kind of like how that piece came about. So this now we're going to this. This is a show exhibition that I have at the ICA in Miami. It's a solo show. And it's up until November 24th. If you happen to be in Miami, check it out. And so I started making these sculptures, and there's these gongs in them. And traditionally, the gongs come from Asia, but in the last 60 years, they've been developed and made in Germany, in other parts of the world, and they've actually been. There's a type of sound healing that's come from this. And these sculptures are what I call disease throwers, because they throw the diseases, and because I actually use these instruments and these sculptures in my healing center that I have. Earlier this year, I got I'll show more later, but it's pretty much I use a lot of sound therapy in the healing sessions that I do, among other things. And basically, every sculpture has this anatomical kind of figure on the top. And these anatomical figures are models are of different body parts that have cancer, and the cancer comes from like friends and family members that had cancer. So, for example, this one here has like the bottom part of the body and it has the colon, because I actually had stage 3 colon cancer, and I actually had cancer while I was here at Hunter doing my thesis. So this one has that one. This one's for another family member that had cancer in the spinal cord. This is actually has the anatomical of a frog, which is actually part of my healing that I used. Well, I had cancer. I used frog from a poison from the. I used kambo, which is called, and it's basically poison from a frog's back, and that's also a healing technique that is used. And this one has lungs. Someone that I know, grandmother had cancer in the lungs, and the gong. So every time the instruments are played, it's meant to kind of release these. Obviously the cancer is gone, but there's trauma that's there, that family trauma that's been carried on from family member to other family members, and this is part of the cleansing. And these are these are like embroideries that I get done also, and these are also related to disease and death, and also like ICE, like literally the Immigration Customs Enforcement that's getting all the deportations. So I have a lot of melting ice everywhere, and it's bleeding. So that's part of the work as well. And this sculpture was also part of it, but this is like in another exhibition, and this is actually the shrine to the undocumented children, and it has the empty water containers, because there's like a lot of not-for-profits that place water jugs in the desert, so people, when they're crossing the border, they actually don't die on us. Unfortunately, the Border Patrol goes and just opens them up and just empties the water out, and so no one can have access to it, which is wrong in so many levels. And all these sculptures that I'm showing you are headdresses on top of it. They're shrines, they're instruments, and they're headdresses. And this is like an example of one of them here. And so like I do, like for example, like the performance that I showed in Texas is like what I call, like I'm creating like these new mythologies basically is what I call my performances. But lately I've also been doing these other type of performances that are just, I'm just activating the sculptures as for sound. And this is an example of just a sound activation that I did for my solo show in Miami. I'll just fast forward here. So I'll just, sorry, okay. So how I tie like the healing and the border politics together is because, like it was mentioned earlier, I was part of the first wave of undocumented children to come here, right? I was undocumented, unaccompanied. I was separated from my family because of a civil war that happened in El Salvador. And when I was a hunter, like many years later, I had cancer. I was like you know, in my mid-30s, and I developed cancer. I'm like, where did this come from? And then I needed to figure out like where it came from. And after doing a lot of work, you know, I went through 2 surgeries, radiation, chemotherapy, and I worked with shamans and healers from everywhere from Tibet, from China, from India, from Israel, El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, Native Americans, from Amazon, like everybody, right? Like I learned all these different types of healing techniques. And there's what I discovered, which was the obvious, right? Like this trauma that I was holding in my gut that eventually turned into a cancerous tumor, right? So a lot of times people are just dealing with cancers. I'm almost gonna go and get surgery and get rid of it. But like the issue is what I learned is like, I needed to cleanse myself from it, from whatever trauma I had, and cleanse 7 generations back, and also cleanse 7 generations forward so it doesn't come back, right? So that was my mindset in approaching all of this. And this is how I connect like the border politics with disease and cancer. I mean, not everyone that has like this traumatic experience is going to develop cancer, but you can develop depression, you can develop so many other different types of illnesses if it goes untreated. So that's why the healing is really important. Earlier this year, I got a grant from the Soros. I got a Soros grant, and basically they gave me some money, and I pretty much created a healing center for undocumented immigrants here in New York. So basically we do a lot of workshops, and I do a lot of sound therapy, and I also pretty much I bring in practitioners. Like I bring anyone that's doing yoga, to qigong, to acupuncture. I bring herbalists, mycologists, nutritionists, I bring people that teach us how to like where to find affordable organic produce in New York and how to prepare them and everything, like, you know. And then we'll have, at the end, I will bring a Salvadoran chef, and she cooks for us after every workshop, and then we'll have conversations. We talk about whatever issues that we're dealing with, meaning like because of the stress of like, imagine trying to raise a family or worrying about your kids and like all this, what's happening with the political climate. So like sometimes they can't even sleep at night, right? So like my job is to actually create calm and to make sure that they have all the tools available, like all these holistic tools available to them. And also this is like you know, a lot of sound therapy that goes into place. Sometimes they're just like, okay, I don't know what to do. My feet are swollen from like working so many hours. And so on, right? And then I bring in herbalists, and they talk about all these different plants that are available for them actually to learn how to heal themselves. And my thing's always like, I'm not here to heal anybody. I'm just here to show you and to teach you the options that you have so you can heal yourself, right? So this is like this is like what I've learned, and this is what I'm continuing to share with people. And this is something that is part of my practice, but also like I share with my students. And I share with anyone that's like that is curious. So if you have some sort of like illness or whatever, reach out. Like, I'm always available. I want to keep that door open. So this is like what's happening, and yeah, this is like spirit level, and it's kind of an ongoing project, and it's also at a private location because of what's happening with the deportations and the rates and everything. So now I'll talk about this project that I did at the Whitney Museum it was last summer, Bachata Huachiche, and basically I just showed drawings for this one, and this is a game, Tripachuca, which actually it's basically a drawing game that I used to play as a kid, and it comes from El Salvador, and some say it goes back to the Mayans, right? Because it's the way the shapes and the forms. And they're saying like it's maybe like how hieroglyphs were kind of invented. So basically, you put pairs of numbers in a piece of paper and you connect them, and then there's another pair of numbers, and you have to go around. The only rule is you can't touch any lines. So then all of a sudden, the more numbers you have in a piece of paper, the more like the lines start to kind of form and get more abstract. So with this, I played this game with someone else who was undocumented. Right, so it becomes like a bond between two people. So here at the Whitney, I got the chance to do a 42-foot mural of Tripachuca, and then I made a series of drawings that also the same thing. And these are actually maps from the 16th century from Mexico, which actually I pretty much I got these files, and then I realized everything that I'm doing, whether sculpture or drawing, is about retracing my migration. So I go back to Mexico because basically my migration when I was 8 years old, I went from El Salvador to Honduras, Guatemala, all the way through Mexico, 2.5 month journey by land. And I'm going back to these places. I haven't gone back to the border yet in Tijuana, but eventually I will. So I've been going back to these places, and I'm actually buying materials there, and I'm collecting materials, and I'm making my sculptures out of them. So on top of that, I'm also been looking for like maps and like this kind of thing. So I came across these Historia Tolteca Chichimeca, and basically there were these maps that depict like river crossings, displacement of the indigenous people of those times. And so I was like, wow, this is pretty much like what's happening to my people from El Salvador that are escaping all the violence, and they're literally crossing that same land. So I pretty much got these maps, and I kind of just took all the information out and just left like the piece of paper, and then I just re-added, and then we played Tripachuca with someone who's undocumented. And that's how these drawings get formed. And so as part of that Whitney exhibition, they let me have the space in the theater to have a performance, right? So I started, this is where I started my trilogy. So this is like part one. And for this one, it was pretty much there's the other two parts. The other one just happened at the Queens Museum like last month. So for this one, I pretty much locked myself in a cage and told the story how I crossed the border in detail, everything that I remember everything. And I told the story how I crossed the story with the help of a coyote and a white dog. And then I created a whole new mythology around it. Like basically these things are turning into like these little mini operas. I had singers. I flew in a band from Mexico City, and I wrote the score with them for the whole thing. And this is just the introduction. And I'll break down some of the characters after this clip. But first I want to talk about the main character, which is La Momia. And La Momia is the protector of the children. And basically, she was inspired by this clip that I'm going to show you guys like right now. Oh. So what inspired, I grew up watching this stuff, like, and what inspired this character that I developed was the lyrics of the song. And it's talking about protecting the children and being of justice and going after the bad guys, right? So I wanted to create this kind of character. And this is my version of La Momia, and this is the introduction to the performance that I did at the Whitney. And keep in mind, so I make these performances, like obviously there's so many people, I think I had like 32 people involved in this one. So I perform in the, I create everything that they're wearing. I'm part of like either like making or collaging these clothing. The sound is really important. I usually make all of it, and sometimes I collaborate with other people. I choreograph everything. I create the whole story, like every movement. I also, the cameras are also important. I choreograph the cameras when we rehearse. I actually place cameras, and they actually, they know if I'm going to step that way. They know that I'm going to turn and go in that direction, so the cameras know exactly what I'm doing. So I'm capable of having these videos afterwards. Because for the longest time, even when I was at Hunter, when I first started at Hunter, I was like, oh, I'm performing. It's going to be ephemeral. I don't give a fuck about cameras. But eventually I was like, you know, I don't have anything for midterm review. So I was like, maybe I should start recording things. That's why I don't have any video when I crossed the border, because I was like, no, just take a picture real quick, and then like I'll tell the story later. But yeah, so please document your performances. So, okay, here we go. Okay, so that was like 5 minutes of like an hour and 10-minute long performance, and I'll just show you some photographs of the rest of it. We started outside, did a little procession around the Whitney, and also this is like a very, this was very challenging for me because this is before like the whole, all the political situation that happened at the Whitney, before Canders was, before we found out that I don't know if you, I'll just explain it just in case some of you guys don't know. So literally after I did this performance, it was found out that, there was the first, there was a confrontation between the immigrants and the border with Border Patrol, and they used pepper bombs at the border, right, at the immigrants. And literally, like one of the Canders, who was kind of like head of the board of the Whitneys, like he has a company that produces these pepper bombs. And this literally happened like a month after this performance. And I was just like, oh wow, that's so crazy. I just did a performance about the border and the politics and everything that's happening. And here's like one of the trustees, the head trustee at the Whitney, has a company that is using pepper bombs to attack the immigrants coming in. And not only that, but also like in Gaza against the Palestinians, during the North Dakota pipeline against the Native Americans, same pepper bombs were being used, right? So like this kind of disgusting human is like really like funding this institution that I just like had my best work in. So I was like in a really complicated space. It was really hard for me to digest what was happening. And then luckily, like, after so many protests and being involved so much, like eventually the guy stepped down, and, the Whitney at least is free of this guy, right? But obviously, like, there's like all this dirty institutional money everywhere. And this is something as artists that we have to kind of question and confront at some point. Hopefully, like, everyone, like, it's like with the Sackler family at the Guggenheim, they pulled out, working with them because of the opioid epidemic that's happening. So, there's dirty money everywhere in the art world. So, at the same time, like, we're artists and we're struggling so much, like, we're trying to make a living. So it's like these are ethical issues that we have to kind of deal with all the time. So for the performance, I had this is a family of undocumented vampires that only drink blood of Americans, and that was a big part of the performance. And here are some of the characters. And this is an 8-year-old girl that was part of the performance. That's how old I was when I crossed the border. So like I said before, so for the performance, I locked myself in a cage and I told the story of how I crossed, and with the help of a coyote and a white dog. And then after that, I asked audience members if they were willing to allow me to suck their neck to see if I could really suck blood. Because, like, what they call immigrants, like, we're vampires, we're here to steal your jobs. So I was like, let me see if I'm capable of sucking the blood out of you. Or if I'm not, I'll just give a big kick in your neck. So there was like a lot of tension, but we had some volunteers that came up and allowed me to give them a hickey in their necks. Not as many as I expected, but at least like 10 people came up. So that was the first part. The second part was Walk on Water, and it happened at the Queens Museum maybe like 3 weeks ago or a month ago. It's like just happened. And for this performance, I was allowed to perform in the panorama of New York City, which is kind of like this jewel of New York. They never let anyone walk on this, and I got permission to walk on water, basically. And I was able to create this new mythology, and this is part 2 to the other one. Basically, it's my life story. This is part 2 of my life story. And this one, I talked about like the deportations in my family and how my life was when I was pretty much undocumented from age 8 to like 27 until I got my citizenship. And I talked about like the hardships and the struggles with that. And also, like, the Dyson vacuums are always, so these are the futuristic coyotes that had the Dyson vacuums and here to cleanse the energy from the space. So they were cleansing New York City. I had a whole sound bath that happened, and then more singing, obviously, from the same La Momia character. I don't have the videos like on my computer. I just looked at it yesterday for the first time, but it's gonna take me months to edit. It's just like so much information, and I'll have that later. So the idea is to actually, from the whole trilogy, to have like 1 hour long videos of each performance. And for each performance, I had like 5 or 6 cameras going. So I have like really strong documentation. And part 3 is coming up at Knockdown Center if you're around on the, March 15, 2020. I got 3 grants for this performance, and I'm making a 22-foot inflatable of my digestive system with a tumor in it, and I'm having a conversation with the tumor. I'm also gonna have La Momia is gonna come back and sing. The coyotes will be there. Obviously, there's one coyote sitting up here in the front. Thank you for coming. And then I'm also gonna have like 32 performers. More sound baths, like this is just gigantic. We're gonna just end with a really big piece, and eventually, like the idea is to have the trilogy in 3 big videos. So that's coming up. That's something that I'm working on. I also have my solo show, Jack Barrett, that's up right now, just opened on Friday. We just got a New York Times mention today. That was good. So if you're in town, like, well, obviously you're here, but if you have a chance, go to see the show. It's up until October 20th. And I have so much more work, but I think we're just gonna end there right now. Thank you guys for coming in. Thank you. If you have any questions, like I'm here.
I have a question about the mumia.
Yeah.
As a little kid, that seems like that would be a pretty scary thing. So, like,
Yeah.
how, has it changed? Is it still scary?
No, I mean, it's not scary anymore, but like I mean, looking back, I was like, I was terrified I was like, wow, this is supposed to be the good guy, you know? But then it's like when, you know, the scary moments right after a while, it's like, okay, like growing up in El Salvador, it was like, I grew up in the Civil War, right? And like these heroes that come from television, like sometimes you wish they were there to protect you, you know? So that's why like this La Momia becomes like this really powerful figure. But I wanted to portray La Momia as a woman too, for the performance, because the protector of the children, right? So it's like, so that's kind of like how that came about, you know? Yeah.
I really loved hearing you talk about the sound and like the 5149 breakdown.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the costumes and like how you make decisions there with the
Yeah.
costumes?
No, I mean, it all depends on the characters that I'm developing, right? So for example, with the coyotes, I was like, okay, I'm gonna have a coyote mask, but I want the coyotes to be from the future. And like, you know, these Dyson vacuums that are coreless now, it's kind of crazy. So like, you know, that's how like this thing starts to build. And even like, for the performance at the Queens Museum, like we needed we needed to wear booties to walk on the water. So like I got like the special kind of like shoes like made for this thing, right? So it's just like, it really depends on what the piece is and the performance. So yeah, so like I'm saying, like, so like if I have 30 performers, I'm in charge of developing everything that they're wearing to the shoelace, right? So it's like, it's really like about finding things and connecting things and just like a lot of trial and error. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
As like an entry point into dealing with trauma, do you have a go-to piece of advice for those of us who are traumatized by this?
Yeah, and I mean, you know, like there's all levels, right? You know, like there's all levels of trauma. I mean, you know, like I'm just so against like prescription drugs in general. But if they work for you, go for it, you know? Like 90% of my students are on antidepressants. And I'm like, okay, if that's working for you, fine. But like start reading up and thinking about it, because that's just like a bandage. You're just covering up the real problem, right? And this is kind of like the Western medicine industry, like this whole thing, how it works. They just want to make money off of you. They want to keep you on the drug and give you a pill that's going to keep you numb for the rest of their life, and they're getting paid. Right, so just be careful what you're taking, right? And the reality is, if you're depressed for whatever reason, find out where depression comes from. And there's different ways of healing. Sometimes just like those that are not sick, maybe just a little 10-minute meditation a day really helps. Goes a long way. Even like I know someone that's dealing with like anger issues. You know, it's like 10 minutes a day meditation. You know, it's like brushing your teeth. It's just kind of like part of it. And all of a sudden you start exploring different things. Obviously, like I was dealing with cancer, so it was like I didn't have a lot of time. I mean, I always had a strong spiritual practice, but when I was dealing with cancer, I spoke to so many people. I was just really curious, and I kept digging. And my healer at the time was like, look, if we can't heal you from this cancer, I'm sending you to my master in a mountain in Korea. And they were going to dig a hole for me and just have my head exposed, and they were going to put all these oils and nutrients into the soil, and I was going to be there for a month. He goes, that's going to cure you, right? I'm not saying, you know, but it was stage 3.5 colon cancer. I almost died. So like that, I was like, I'm gone. I'm going to Korea, right? But I didn't have to go there, so I got lucky. But like I said, sometimes it's just like if it's a depression or something like this, it could be just like your dieting, your sleep, like a combination of a lot of things, you know. Like it could be a breakup, like these things can just kind of like linger, you know. So it's like it really depends on what level it is. Yeah. Yeah.
So your piece in the GOP parking lot, can you talk a bit about how people received it? Like, did you feel surprised that they seemed to appreciate it? I saw some people clapping.
Yeah. Yeah, no, actually it was like, you know, like performing in New York, like I'm preaching to the choir, like it's like super easy. But something that I found challenging is I'm traveling like and performing, like you don't know what, actually like from what I was told, like my friends that were there, like a lot of people were just like leaving. The minute as I started talking about political things, they were just like leaving, really upset. Because they wanted to just be entertained, but once they realized, oh wow, this guy's doing some political thing here, like they were just like leaving. They didn't want to deal with it. But like even like at the Whitney, you know, like when I was like, I had a plan. So like I always have a plan B for performances. Like sometimes I have like plans like all the way B, C, D, all the way to letter Z. Like I have backups for everything, right? Whether it's the weather or whatever. But sometimes like, well, what if a Trump supporter comes into that cage with me, tries to hit me in the face? Right? I had a plan for that. So like the same applies to when I went to Texas. Like we had a confrontation with the police. Like we had permission to go do this performance. Once they found out what it was, they didn't let us in. So we're an hour late getting this performance going because there were Trump supporters, the cops that were there. They didn't want us in space. They did not want us in there. And we actually had a letter from the city that we were supposed to perform, and still were like, they will not let us in. Eventually, someone had to come and just clear them out. And they were just like there, really like, I felt the tension, you know, the cops like really, they probably wanted to arrest me afterwards, after everything that I did. But yeah, so like but for the most part, like, you know, it was a very liberal crowd that came, so I was like very lucky. But yeah, like I haven't been in that situation yet that the majority has been on the other side yet. So I'm like really curious to what might happen. Yeah.
Do you work with a team, like an executive producer?
No, I do everything by myself. Yeah. Yeah, I enjoy that. I enjoy that aspect. I mean, that's why the performances take so long to make. You know, it may take me 3 or 4 months to make a performance. On top of like, you know, it's pretty fast, but like I'm teaching and I'm commuting and I'm like my personal life and all the other like physical shows. So like there's a lot going on. But when I'm like, people invite me to perform, it's like, sorry, I'm like maxed out for the year because I could only do 3 or 4 a year. You know, so it's like I'm not gonna kill myself either. And sometimes like this big one that's coming up, I'm gonna be pretty exhausted. I'm already working on it. We're in September. It's in March. I'm not doing any more performances until then. It's just like such a big project, you know. But I do enjoy like every aspect of it, you know. And like the only time that I allow some collaboration is when I have audience participation, which I always have in the performances. Because if not, like I think it's really important because then it just becomes like a theater, right? I want to have some places that I have loose control over it, and that's why I bring the audience to participate all the time. But yeah, I really enjoy like being involved in everything, even the cameras. You know. Yeah.
Can you talk just a little bit more about documentation? Like, I
Yeah.
appreciate what you said. I'm just wondering, do you give them like a script or something ahead of time?
So
How do you
Okay, so like, if we're in theater, like institution will give us, here, rehearse for 2 months, right? Here's use your theater like all day, right, for 2 months. But in the performance world, like even a performance of this scale, a lot of times, even the performance themselves haven't been in the same room yet, right? So it's like, wow, how do you put this together? And sometimes we got 1 to 2 hours to like rehearse for the first time, and then we're doing it for real. But I use sound as cues all the time, or just my gestures. So basically, like sometimes if I touch my ear, the performers know that they gotta go in circles, right? So the same cues that I use for the performers, the cameras know the cues too. So like that's how like, okay, like they know that I'm gonna walk over there and get the ice cream from the corner, like and the performers need to know. So like I do certain gestures, or a bell, or a sound, or a movement, and everyone kind of knows exactly what I'm doing. Because most of the time, the performers have never been in the same room together. Yeah. So, luckily for this trilogy, I'm able to use the same team, so they already know my work. But normally, I don't. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How far in advance do you prepare your performers? Do they know like if they're set when they get there?
No, they know. Yeah, they totally know. Usually a lot of Skype if I'm in a different city, a lot of conversations. But I tell them not to worry about the other people, just worry about your part. Because it gets confusing, So I'm like, okay, your part, you're going to be wearing this and that, you're okay with that. And then we have a conversation, and like they go in there, and they're like, well, I didn't know it was going to be this complex. There's like 30 other people here. So, yeah. So like usually like I work with the teams. And luckily with Nima, who's one of the coyotes here, like I've been able to kind of, work with him and 2 other people, and then they've worked with me like 3 or 4 performances already, so they get it. So like we can just go. Actually, we did one in Miami like 3 weeks ago, like right after the Queens one. A week later, I was in Miami, but they already I work with them so much that they already get it. So that's been kind of great. Yeah. Yes. So for the longest time, when I first started, when I was on Hunter, like I would just pay for everything, right? Obviously it was just like, so I don't have any money, so I was always trying to like work extra hours or whatever. But lately, so I'm in this position now that actually for the one in Knockdown Center, I got 3 grants. I got a MAP fund, Franklin Furnace, and I got a funding from the Knockdown Center, which I had to apply. So a lot of grant writing happens. So even for the Healing Center, I got a grant, right? So there's just so much writing that goes into my practice now. So I'm advising all you guys too, like the writing is really important. Like learn, like really, like when you're making the work, sometimes sit back and write about it. Even if you're not happy where you are with the work, but like really start developing like how to, it's all about grant writing. And I also do all my grant writing too. I have someone that does all the grammar and spell check and all that, but like that's a separate thing. But like now it's like I'm not performing unless I have a big budget. I can perform by myself too. I could always go back and do that, but then if I don't have my entire team, then what is the space that I'm performing in? And maybe crossing the border, right? Something just like as simple as a gesture like that. I could do it on my own. So it really depends on the performance and also the location. Yeah.
Do you have a team helping you create your freestanding sculptures?
No. The sculptures, actually, like the sculptures is one thing that I enjoy doing, mostly by myself. I did hire someone to help me mix like some of the materials, but they're just like mixing the materials because of lack of time. Right now I have another show at the ICA in Richmond, Virginia, and I'm making 4 16-foot sculptures right now, and I got to do them in 6 weeks. So I'm actually going to hire 2 people to help me, like just in the studio. But as far as making, connecting everything, I just do all that by myself. And this one is actually the first performance where I'm combining like the actual headdresses with a healing ritual, and we're doing an all-night gong bath. So we're gonna have 50 yoga mats on the floor, and you can come in there with your pillow, your blanket, and go to sleep. And we're gonna play for 8 hours from 11 p.m. all the way to like 6, 7 in the morning. So we're going to be playing the gongs for the whole time and while people are sleeping. And that's coming up November 8th in Virginia, yeah. So that should be interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the role of spirituality in your work?
Yeah, yeah.
Mixing in different
Yeah, no, so totally. So, you know, like I always felt like I needed to cleanse something, you know, and then eventually when I got sick, it's like when I went really further into it. Because I did a lot of research, and like I had family members die from cancer even before I got it, right? So I just started like really wondering of all these different kind of healing techniques that are in the world. You know, and like it can get really cheesy with new agey and blah blah blah, but shamanism has been around for thousands of years, and it goes back to my ancestors, the Mayas. You know, for them it was all about rituals and connection to nature and the plants and using all these like natural things to heal yourself. And a lot of that information is lost, but still a lot of it's still out there too. So like that's how I connect myself, because like that's what I'm saying. Like if you want to heal yourself, you know, luckily like if it wasn't for Western medicine, I wouldn't be standing here either, right? I use radiation, chemotherapy, and 2 surgeries. So it is about combining all different things. Like I was saying earlier before, like if you're taking antidepressants, sometimes you need it, right? But I say there's other ways of healing the core of the problem. So like spirituality, you know, religion's another thing, you know, so it's like really you have to be clear like what it is that you want to do with it. Yeah.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you guys. Thank you. Muchas gracias.